All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Grounded Man Live. My name is Braden Stockfish. I'm the visionary leader here at the Grounded Man. And the Grounded Man is the community for men who are ready to stop living their life on autopilot and step into responsibility and into leadership for themselves, for their families, and for their communities. And we do that here by looking at the system of self leadership and the 6 pillars of self leadership. And that's what I want to talk about today. This is the first video putting out in 2026. So happy New Year. And I want to take this time to go a bit into a deeper explanation about what is self leadership and what are the 6 pillars and what are some of the structure that we create in the container here at the Grounded Man for our members and for anyone who comes in and does work with us. And so, yeah, we are in January, which for us is the beginning of a new cycle. Yeah, again, it's the new year, and something I like to talk about. Seeing it a lot more online lately, and people talking about how it doesn't really feel like this is the new year, right? We follow the calendar, but the calendar that we follow in the Western world, and I guess the world at large, really. I know there are little pockets that don't necessarily, but for sure in the Western world, we follow the Gregorian calendar, which is really built around like a fiscal year, and it doesn't really connect to nature, right? For a lot of people, they resonate more with the new year being in spring, which makes sense from that sense of like, okay, everything has started to come back to life again, and that seems like a new beginning. It kind of makes sense. um and so that's what we do here at the Grounded Man, is really follow nature. As an example of that, like, we're in Ottawa locally here for our in-person group. We've been at capacity for a little while. Like, yeah, we've got room to grow more in the space that we're in, but we've started to look at new spaces, to open up new spaces here in Ottawa so that we can have more guys in different areas meeting. And we were going to do that in January. um there was something in me that was like, no, I'm not really, it doesn't feel good. Like, let's do that in March. And at first it was because I'm down in Central America, so I'm traveling here for 6 weeks. And that was the first piece for me, was like, I want to wait till I'm back. But that felt like a control for me. It felt like I was trying to control, and I needed to be there to make that happen. But there are so many other strong, capable leaders within our community that I was like, okay, if it's coming from a place of control, I'm going to let it go, and we're going to do it in January. But as I started to move that ball forward, it turned out that, the space that we were going to rent from didn't have every week available in January and February. There were 4 weeks that weren't going to be available on the days that we needed them. So it was very like sporadic. There wasn't going to be a consistent weekly meeting, which is what we do. Um, and there were a couple other pieces that came up, so that when I'm listening to how the world is communicating to me, it was like, oh, starting in March at this place, every week until the end of the year is available. And again, there were a couple other pieces that kind of, as I was listening, it was like, okay, I let go of the reins of control and allowed that. I didn't want that to be the driver. But then the universe communicated to me that, like, no, actually it is better to start in March. And then that made sense to me, because it's like, oh yeah. And then when I think of the cycles of nature and spring and returning to life, it's like, yeah, of course that makes sense, that's when we're going to add new growth to this community, is when nature is growing herself, right? And so that's one aspect of to me what self leadership is like, there's an idea and a desire to bring things into the world that I might have, but it's a co-creation with the world. So as much as I might want to create something and be like, this is how it has to be, it's like, well, I also have to be open to listening to how the world responds to what I put out. and it's a bit of a dance in that way. And I find when I do the dance and I listen and I don't push, it's like that's when the most, you know, fruitful endeavors happen. And so there's something exciting that I'm like, oh, I'm excited to open up our new space in March because I think there's something that's going to happen in that I don't even know what it is yet. But I know that by waiting and listening in this way and honoring the cycles of nature, that it's going to yield better results. A little tangent there. Coming back to, so this is January. We're in the middle of winter, right? We just started winter, really. The winter solstice is December 21st, and so basically from December 21st until March 20th or 21st, it's winter. And so for us, we layer on the masculine archetypes onto that. So there's a great book, if you're not familiar with it, The King, Warrior, Magician, Lover by Robert Moore and Douglas Gillette. Incredible book about the major masculine archetypes. There are others, really draws on Jungian psychology and just archetypal work that's been done, which means like these things are so common in our history as men that we're actually able to create like characters and archetypes and stories about them because of how consistently they show up across time in men. And so, king, warrior, magician, lover, those are the four archetypes. And when we think of winter, winter is very much a time of rest, right? It's a time of rest and reflection, turning inward. It's dark, the days are short, there's not a lot of light, so it's not really meant for action. It's not really meant for new ideas. Nothing's going to grow when it's cold and freezing and there's minimal light. It's really a time for turning inward, and that's the role of the king, right? The king kind of sits in the throne and overlooks the kingdom, and it's his job to watch things and reflect on things and see like, okay, how did we do this year? How did we do on the goals that we have? Did we achieve them? What doesn't belong in the kingdom after this last year that we look at? What came in here that maybe we don't want in this next cycle that we're gonna cut out, and we need to tell the warrior to bring boundaries in, and we need to tell the magician that this is what we want to create more of, and we need to tell the lover that like here's what we want to make love to in this next cycle. So the king is really that energy of reflection, rest, and also gratitude. Gratitude is a huge energy of winter and of the king. um, because yeah, it's like, wow, look at this kingdom I'm building. Look at what is here. Look at what I've accomplished. Look at what I get to say no to. And can I feel gratitude for all of that? And so that's what I try, that's what I share with the group, and that's what our community tries to cultivate during this winter season is gratitude, rest, and reflection. And and then we also layer self leadership and our six pillars onto that. And so each month we go through one of the pillars of self leadership. So we go through two cycles a year. So from January to June is our first cycle of the six pillars. And then from July to December, we go through them again. And the nice thing about that is like, there's no repetition. I could do 12 months of physical health, and there's so much to cover in physical health and to learn about and to deepen my relationship to my body and caring for my body and my physical environment that I live in, that yeah, we could constantly be learning new things just on that. And so that's something that I really love about having that repetition, is that like no matter if you're new coming into the group and into the community, or if you've been here for years with us, we're still going to be learning new, and there's always more that we can peel back on and understand about ourselves through the lens of these six pillars. And we intentionally start with physical health because this is the body that we engage with, the physical environment with that we live in. And we believe that if you're not tending to that, like the rest, you can do work mentally, emotionally, relationally, financially, spiritually, and they're all interrelated with each other anyway. But if you're not caring for the body, and I learned this myself, right? I dove deep into psychological and emotional work in my journey at first, and even after years of emotional process work and therapy, there were pieces that I couldn't quite figure out. I didn't quite. The issues kept coming back, and it wasn't until I made changes to my diet and started moving my body more every day and really curating the environment that I live in and resting and learning about my breath and all of these components of physical health, that it was like, oh wow, once I started actually taking care of my body, a lot of those issues left, right? I didn't even have to do any more emotional process work because it was like, oh, I was just anxious because I didn't have enough protein. And I was feeling like overwhelmed and burnt out because like I wasn't giving myself enough rest in my schedule. And so looking at that lens, building that foundation, that's why we start with our first pillar of physical health, is because it's important to tend to the vessel first. um, and so that's what we do in January. And we also layer that in with, like I mentioned, the energy of the king, right? And so, how do we look at physical health through the lens of the king? And through that lens of like, yeah, we're focusing more on rest and reflection, and we can still set goals for what we want to do when it is time for action. And that doesn't mean because I'm focusing on rest and reflection that I'm not still getting after it every day in some way, shape, or form, and taking care of my body and nourishing myself, right? That's part of the energy of the king. But it might not be the time that I, start a new routine, or, push myself to like hit my new PR on bench press, or, run a marathon, whatever it is. It's like, yeah, maybe I'm not going to do that in the middle of winter. But I'm going to set a goal to do that when I'm ready, in the magic of spring, in the time of summer when like my lover's active, or even in the fall, right, as things are starting to fall away and the warrior's coming out, and I want to squeeze a little more out of life. And so, yeah, that's a bit about how we kind of go through things here, and the lens that we look at men's work through. And so these first 3 months, it's physical health in January. Then we move February into mental health. Again, all of these kind of build on each other, and they're all very interconnected, right? We are holistic beings. We are not these like little itemized individual pieces. It's everything is really impacting and affecting each other. So even though we're focusing on physical health in January, we can't really talk about physical health without talking about the other five pillars as well. It's just something we use as a point of reference, and as a way to like bring in guests and have them share about their expertise, and to just kind of structure the discussions that we're having, so that as we do go deeper and deeper into these topics and how we are becoming better leaders of ourselves, it just helps us to have that little bit of framework, right? So we go into mental health in February, emotional health in March, and again, all of those are going to be looked at through the lens of winter, through the lens of the king, and that energy of like rest and digest and gratitude, and reflection. And then winter turns to spring, and we start to see nature bringing life back, right? There's the energy of creation. This is when nature is creating, and life is starting to come back. And so that's the energy of the magician, right? The magician is the one who creates, who puts transmutes into the physical, takes ideas and brings them into the real world, takes things that were dormant and sleeping and resting and brings them into life, which is exactly what's happening in nature at that time. And so then April, May, June, we go through the next three pillars, which is relational health. So looking at relationships and how we're tending to relationships, financial health, and spiritual health. And so we look at each of those through the lens of the magician. And again, here at the Grounded Man, like we believe as a man, if you're working on yourself physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, financially, and relationally, you are setting yourself up for success, right? You are going to uh, be leading yourself in a way that is very powerful if you're taking regular attention and action on each of those steps, or yeah, attention is the better word, because there's not always action to be taken, but um if we're looking at ourselves on each of those levels, on each of those pillars regularly and developing ourselves, then yeah, we're setting ourselves up to lead ourselves, to lead our families, and to lead our communities with strength, with intention, with integrity, and um, it's a beautiful thing. And so that's why we go through those six pillars, and that's the foundation of what self leadership is. Um, and then we do it all again, July to December. We go through it again. The summer from July to September, that's when life is in its fullness, right? It's really about celebration, it's love, it's excitement, it's connection. And so that's the energy of the lover during the summer. And then as we move into the fall, things are starting to fall away. We're starting to retreat inward again. We're preparing for that winter season, which means we're putting up boundaries, right? We're starting to create boundaries and a little more containment in our lives. And it's also like we're going out on those final missions. It's like, okay, the days are starting to shorten again. It's time to take action. It's time to get out there and do some of those final things before we go into rest again as we set these boundaries. And so that's the energy of the warrior, right? And so that helps us to kind of just layer things on with the cycle of nature and also with the archetypes of men. There are other layers that we add in there as well as we go through that in the community, because, yeah, I mean, you can look at the four directions, east being where the sun rises, which is where life begins, right? It's the creation energy. And so that's the spring. And south is like the fullness, right? That's where the sun always is from our hemisphere. And so the south is the energy of the lover, and the west is the sun is setting, and so that's the energy of the warrior. And then the north is the knight and the elders and the wisdom space. And so that's the energy of the king. And again, there are things internally in the body. There are all kinds of ways we can weave a story. But that's kind of how we look at things here at the Grounded Man, and where self leadership begins. And what I wanted to share with you a bit about what we do here, because I think it's well, I know it's quite powerful. I've been doing this for a few years, and we've had hundreds of guys come through, and lots of guys that stay with us for years, and it's been a beautiful system that develops, right? It's not something that happened right away. It's through a process of listening and co-creating that we've deepened the way that we go through these cycles. And yeah, it's going to continue to grow and continue to evolve. There's no saying that in 2027 that's going to be the same way that we go through things. And so yeah, we're constantly listening, we're constantly shaping this container in the way. But self leadership and the six pillars are kind of the anchor point of how we develop ourselves as men. And yeah, the other piece I want to talk about, I guess, is like, what is self leadership? Um, because self leadership itself, it's like, okay, it's pretty self explanatory. I'm leading myself, and that's an important quality. I think in the world that we live in today, a lot of men are not leading themselves. A lot of men are being led by the system, right? They're being told what to do, when to be where, how to do things, there's not a lot of thinking for ourselves. We think we are, and there's like that, even saying that, it's like, hey, I'm thinking for myself, like I want to defend that. But in reality, there's a lot of layers of conditioning and beliefs and ways of doing things that have been installed into us from the beginning, from when we go to school and then we enter the workforce, and all of these things that, like, yeah, a lot of ways that men are leading in their lives is for someone else's mission. It's, most people are working for someone else. It's not for their own desires. It's like, oh yeah, I'm working to make money to provide for my family, but the thing that I'm doing for work isn't really my own leadership. Um, and so there's that aspect, which is like, we're calling in more of leading from ourselves and asking, because again, a system that's designed to like create better factory workers, better people who listen and obey the system, it's not really in the best interest of someone who's designing that for you to think for yourself. Because if you're like repeating the same thing every day and doing it, and you're just doing it and you're following the story and you're not asking questions, that's great. But if you start asking, like, why am I doing this? What do I really love? What is really important to me? Is the company I'm working for really embodying the values that are important to me? And do I want to continue supporting a company that's not in alignment with my values? I mean, if everyone starts thinking in that way, people are going to start to stop working in places, and people are going to start to do things differently, and then the system gets disrupted, right? And that's not what it wants. And so self leadership is a bit of that. It's a bit of asking yourself and doing that reflective work of the king to say, like, hey, why do I do the things I do, right? And take stock of your life a little more, because we need to look at, like, hey, where do some of these patterns come from? Why do I behave the way I do? What's happened to me in my life that causes me to behave the way I do? And so we start to ask some of these questions so that we can lead ourselves better. Um, so that's like at face value what self leadership can mean, but there's a hidden piece for me as well in there that is, self, capital S, self. So if you're familiar with parts work, with internal family systems, um, there are other places like the higher self, the soul is called in some beliefs. But the fact is, like, there is an energy that kind of sits behind who we think we are, uh, and then there are all these other parts that come up that are built during our life. But self energy is like the witness. Again, it's like, I call it the king, right? Because the king is that one sitting on the throne, the witness. It's been there since you were born. It's pure consciousness. It's not the titles that you have. It's not dad. It's not engineer. It's not any preferences. It's the quiet thing behind all of that that is just watching. And if you're familiar with meditation, you know what this energy is. It's the conscious witness, right? It's not the one who gets lost in thought. In internal family systems, an incredibly powerful therapeutic model developed by Richard Schwartz, he talks about the 8 C's of self. And so if you're feeling calm, confident, connected, courageous, I'm not going to think of all 8 right now, but if you feel these 8 kind of C's, which again is very much king energy: calm, confident, courageous, compassionate, caring. Um, that's how a king is in his fullness. And so if you're feeling those, that's how you're in self energy. And if you're feeling anything else, like, oh, I'm anxious, oh, I'm sad, oh, I'm joyful and ecstatic, oh, I'm tired, it's like, okay, well, that's probably not self energy, right? That's a part of you that is feeling something else and is asking for attention and needs to be tended to. Um, and so our goal is or my goal is to help as many men as possible to learn what self is and to be in that self energy as much as possible, because if we live life from that place of calm, clarity, courageousness, connectedness, confidence, compassion, life, we when we make decisions from that place, it's going to serve the whole kingdom. And so how I imagine it is for myself is like there's a throne room in my psyche, in my brain, right? There's a throne of consciousness, which is where I make decisions from in any moment. And I want my king or my self energy to lead, to be on the throne as much as possible. But there's all these other parts in the kingdom, hurt parts and different parts that are trying to get on the throne. So when something happens in life, when my partner says something to me that, part of me gets triggered and activated, all of a sudden that part wants to jump on the throne and say, no, we need to respond in this way. We need to get angry. We need to get defensive here because we're hurt. And it's like, oh, okay. Can I notice that through self energy? Can I take a breath and be like, okay, I see you. I see you, part. You want to sit on the throne and you want me to get defensive with my partner here. But, I've done that before and it's not really that effective. And so, can we take a pause and some breaths, and can we ask that maybe you step off the throne? I'm not going to let you make a decision here. And I'm going to invite that king, that self energy back. And we're going to give time and space for you to hear, oh, wow, okay, you feel hurt by what this person said. And oh, it reminds you of a time in the past when someone else put you in a position where you felt like you were inadequate, and oh, it reminds you of another time before that where you felt inadequate. And all of a sudden we start to like realize like, oh, there's this whole story that I have that my partner triggered in an instant, but and I feel inadequate. And now what I need is a moment of acknowledgement to say like, hey, no, you're not inadequate, you're perfectly enough, and I love you. And now how can I acknowledge that part and love it and give it what it needs, and then turn back to my partner and hear what she's saying from a calm and compassionate lens, and respond to that in the way that is going to serve our relationship best rather than from that hurt part. And so that's what self leadership is really, is letting the king be on the throne as much as possible. And that takes a lot of work. That's a lifetime of work. It's yeah, I mean, we're human beings. We're going to get triggered by so many different things on a daily basis, and to, especially if you're someone like me and you're engaging with the world a lot. I mean, yeah, there's the option of like going, to be a monk and live in a monastery and kind of withdraw from a lot of the external temptations that one might have and one might get triggered in. And some might argue that that might be easier to remain in self energy with, and when we live in the Western world where there's so much going on and so much stimulation and so much happening that can trigger us and put us into these different parts, it's like, oh yeah, maybe it requires a little more skillful navigation to ensure that the king is on the throne and that we're making decisions from that place of clarity. And that's really what self leadership is all about. And so we use that as that's the real foundation. And then to support, how do we get the king on the throne as much as possible? Well, we tend to the six pillars, right? We tend to our physical health, our mental health, our emotional health, our relationships, our finances, and our spirituality. And if we're tending to all of those, because we're going to find triggers and parts that are hurt and parts that want things in each of those categories. We're going to find stories and limiting beliefs and things that we've adopted that aren't ours. It's all going to be in those pillars. And so if we keep looking at those and addressing that, we're building a stronger foundation. We're building a kingdom inside that is really starting to thrive, where the parts of us feel loved, they feel nourished, they feel in support, and we're all working towards a common goal that the king wants for the world. And really the king doesn't want anything. The job of the king, because it's calm and clear and compassionate and courageous, like there's really no desire that comes from there. So that's a listening, right? It's like, what can we listen to? What wants to come through me? What is this like bigger thing that I'm part of asking me to do in this moment? And it's really tough to listen when we're caught up in those like, oh, tension parts. We can't hear. So we need to soften and relax and come into that self energy, because that's when we can channel life through us. I'm going to leave that there for today. Thank you so much for tuning in. Um, yeah, it was a pleasure to talk about and to share a bit more about self leadership and what that means here at the Grounded Man. Um, we have a in-person community here in Ottawa, Canada. I'm not here in Ottawa right now. Again, I'm in Central America right now, but in Ottawa, we have an in-person community. We meet once a week, every Thursday night right now, but there's going to be more coming in spring, in March, as we open up new spaces. And we're also opening up an online space in March. So we're going to be running a program called the Modern Man Initiation. And so we're going to be taking guys through an 8-week initiation process to initiate men into self energy, to help guys really understand what self energy is. Think of it as like an initiation into that. So it's like if you have no idea what self is, great. This is an opportunity for you to get initiated into understanding it. But even if you do have an idea, this is a great opportunity for you to, like I say, there's always deeper layers. And I think we've got a pretty strong system here to help men understand themselves so that they can, get out of living on autopilot and letting all of these parts just automatically run their life, and start to take more responsibility for themselves, and create a life where they're thriving, so that they can tend to themselves. And then once we're tending to ourselves, we can start tending to family and community a lot better as well, right? It all just ripples out from there. And so, Modern Man Initiation, we're starting that in the spring as well. That'll be an 8-week intensive program that helps us to all get on the same page. And we're calling it the Modern Man because that's a big piece that's happening right now. Is like, we're really in a space where we're redefining what it means to be a man, right? The models that we've inherited from the generations before us are not useful anymore. You know, there are things we can learn for sure, and there's wisdom there to be had. But the ways that men were expected to show up and to be is outdated now. And you can pretty much ask any woman around you about that, and they're going to tell you that, yeah, they're looking for something new from men. And so there are a lot of men such as myself and many in the community and many around the world. There are many other communities. Men's work is becoming more and more popular for this exact reason, because we are being asked to step into something new. And so that's what this is about, is to say, hey, in the modern world that we're living in, there's a new way of being. There's a new level of responsibility that we have to take as men. There's a new connection that goes beyond the logical brain, and we need to start connecting to our hearts as well, and connecting to the fullness of ourselves as human beings, which is why I believe the like full 6 pillars of self-leadership approach is so beautiful. And we're being asked to step into that. And so this is an initiatory rite of passage that's going to help you to understand what that means, to contribute to the conversation that we're having, because I don't know what it means for every man, right? This is why we need to gather. We need to be together. We need to collectively define what that modern man looks like. And I think I'm doing a great job of listening, but we want more of you to come and join the conversation with us. because the more perspectives we can have, the more like fullness we can bring to what it means. And you know, none of us have to be all of that at once. That's why having a community can be so beneficial as well. So stay tuned. We're going to be putting more details out on our socials, on Instagram, on Facebook. You can follow us on any socials: YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, at @the_grounded man. Thank you so much again for tuning in. I look forward to seeing you again soon. And yeah, drop a comment here if this resonated in any way. I would love to hear your thoughts, your feedback, any questions, anything you want to share, throw it in the comments here. All right. Wishing you a wonderful winter season of reflection, rest, and gratitude. Much love. Ciao.